I just added it. Sorry, you guys. So
okay.
people on YouTube, it might take a second to catch up. When I was setting up the stream, I pressed the wrong face, so I didn't add the
face.
Yeah, I didn't put the Pencil to Pencil channel. I put the JAMAR Nicholas channel. So I had to get rid of the JAMAR Nicholas channel, put the Pencil to Pencil channel. So hopefully this will work. So we'll just kind of give it a minute. So we'll do
very clickable face.
We'll do a soft shoe until things get caught up. Somebody might be like, "What happened?" But we're here. We're here, you guys. Oh my God, that was stressful. Oh my God! Like I just noticed it like at the very last minute. Like shit. Look, I'm all right. I'm almost together. We'll get it together. All right, guys, let's do some intros. You ready? Whoa. Guys, welcome back to Pencil to Pencil, your weekly live cast brought to you by three expert, 3 count of 1, 2, 3 expert cartoonists from Pinch Me, I Must Be Dreaming Land. You know who you are. I am your first co-host. My name is JAMAR Nicholas. I wear many hats besides this white one.
I've only seen you wear that hat.
Well, you know, when the winter comes, I put the beanie on. But and Mike, you've known me for a long time. I've always worn hats. I'm a hat guy.
That's right. I think your brain is exposed. That's why you wear a hat.
Oh, kind of like Mars Attacks, right?
That's right. Like, Mars Attacks under that bucket.
I hold a seat on the board of directors for the National Cartoonist Society. I'm also the chapter chair of Philadelphia Go Birds. Beyond all those things, I also have a middle grade graphic novel series at Scholastic Graphics. Leon the Extraordinary is the name. Thank you, Stone Cold Steve Conley. The newest book, Leon Worst Friends Forever, is in stores now. What do they have to do, Steve?
I believe they have to cop it, and if they don't, they have to explain why.
Cop it, why don't you? I love it. But I would be remiss if I did not introduce my cohort, co-conspirator, and co-confidant. He is I think he's in title contention. There's nothing else to say. He's chasing down the champion right now. He's ducking him. He's going up the Atlantic seaboard. He's going to find him, and when he does, let's make that title motion. Discount double check time. Guys, give it up for, by God, it's Stone Cold Steve Conley. What's up, Steve Conley?
How do I miss you guys so much? I saw you just last week, and I miss you guys. My name is Steve Conley. I write and draw the webcomic The Middle Age, which you can read at middleagecomic.com. It's over on the Webtoons, the Tapas, the Go Comics. It is your 23rd favorite webcomic. And coincidentally, 23,000 subscribers over on Webtoons.
Yes.
Yay.
And I make TTRPG stuff. So if you play the Dungeons and or the Dragons.
The Dragon.
I've got a bunch of TTRPG books. You go to steveconley.com and coming soon to stabracadabra.com.
I love that name. Say it one more time.
Stabracadabra.
Stabracadabra.
And I would be remiss. I did not introduce the maestro of mark making, Darkhawk's daddy. He drew your childhood, and he is the tower power of the man of the hour, too sweet to be sour, Mr. Mike Manley.
Hey,
hello, everybody.
What up,
I am the magic man who drew your childhood. So whatever problems you have as an adult, the psychosis, you can blame me.
You see the line starts to the left.
That's right. I am currently drawing. Actually, today I was working on both strips. I do with the Phantom and Judge Parker. So I was going back and forth between both strips today and drawing motorcycles, which I hate drawing.
And Judge Parker? A lot of motorcycles in Judge Parker?
No, motorcycles this week in the Phantom.
Gotcha. Steve,
I've never drawn a motorcycle in Judge Parker.
Steve, ask Mike a question about comic strips, and I got to figure something out like this.
Okay, so you don't find yourself drawing the wolves and horses in Judge Parker that often?
Horses, yes, because they live on a horse farm. But I haven't drawn. I think back in the spring, there was a little bit of a week where their two sisters were riding horses. So, and that's another hard thing to draw is horses. You know, both strips, especially the Phantom, requires you to draw like all the hard stuff.
Right.
You know, guys with guns. Like last week, I was drawing guys wearing combat gear and like AK-47s, and you know, it's like all that stuff is very picky. You know, all the little. If you're going to draw a gun, you know, you got to draw an accurate gun, and that's hard work.
Do you have a archive? I assume you have on your desktop. You have folders of guns, tanks, horses, wolves, everything you.
Yeah, I mean, I actually have different folders. I have like an environment folder for Judge Parker, which is like the major stuff, major characters. On the Phantom, usually what I do with each story is I build a folder as I go along. Like, you know, there'll be folders for characters or folders for vehicles or locations or whatever. So, and then I have like a master folder of all the various regular characters. So one of the things I do at the end of a story is I have to go through and go like, I don't need this, I don't need this, this I'll keep. I don't need this. But yeah, I mean, it's I was reading part of an interview with Cy Berry, who we're going to actually have on the podcast next month. And he was talking about how hard the strip is because it requires you to do a lot of reference. It's a very reference heavy strip.
Wow, that's fantastic. I just saw Cy Berry at the Rubin Awards.
Yes, I saw his acceptance speech.
Yes, Cy was awarded the Elsie Segar Award for excellence in cartooning, and what a sweet man! It was a really great moment. Everybody stood up and applauded for him, and he had some really nice things to say. Some of the thing, and to paraphrase, some of the things he said was kind of like, you know, I just kind of did the work, and you kind of, especially kind of the era he came up in, there was no way to look out the window and see people clapping for you, or seeing people be, you know, kind of invigorated by you and celebrating you. And he's like, it all kind of catches you by surprise later in his life, but he's really thankful for it. And I think that, you know, it's such an interesting corollary between where we are now as cartoonists. And I've said a million times, the modern cartoonist can't just hide in a studio. Like, you have to have platforms and channels and social media and all the other kind of stuff. So, you know, I wonder how a Cy Berry would be if he was like, you know, had to start out in the last 30 years. I think it'd be a whole different conversation. But I don't think the work would be different.
Yeah, I mean, one of the other things is that when he did the strips were in the heyday of towards. He started in 60, 61. So strips are still pretty big. But it's also different when you own the strip and you create the strip rather than you just being a hired gun on the strip. Right? Because when you own the strip, then you have a lot more control, you get a lot more feedback, you have a lot more information. You know, it is very rare for anyone who is in my position on the strip, like I said before, to actually know, well, how well is the strip going? How many papers is it in? You don't have a lot of control because it's not my property. I don't own it. I draw it, and and I'm like the sheriff you bring in town, you know, to run the law. But you know, it's a very different, and his era too was different because comic strips. It's hard to imagine for people today, but comic strips is what everybody wanted to do. If you did a comic strip from the 50s back, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
Because newspapers were huge, huge.
Right.
It was like the internet and movies and everything all rolled into one. And it's really hard for modern people to imagine how important. I mean, papers would compete to get creators to work for them. Yeah. So it's a very different very different era now. So yeah, I don't know. And I think some people probably, and I know some artists, they're very gregarious and they love, posting. They post their breakfast, lunch, and dinner on social media, and you got other people who like, I don't like to talk to people. I don't like. It's true. Not every cartoonist is a social butterfly. Some people are like, I'd rather not answer email.
Right.
I'd rather not go on and get into a debate and get their feelings hurt, because sometimes people can be kind of cruel. And I have a thick skin, man. I found that out right away on the Phantom.
What do they say? Never read the comments.
Right. You don't want to ever read the comments, but then sometimes they write you and insult you.
That's a special kind of hate, right?
Yeah. So
I feel like that could be a topic for our an episode when we're just chewing the cud, where we're just kicking the ball around, because I really feel like the comments and interacting with our audiences is a thing that really should be talked about.
Yeah, let's do it. This might be a good segue. Oh, speaking of that, our boy George Gant. What up, George Gant? Please read "Beware of Toddler" in your paper. George Gant says the old Comics Kingdom comment section was rough. Right, and that's spoken from somebody who's in the game, just like you are. This will be a great segue into introducing our guest. Mike, would you like to do the honors?
Okay. It's like I met Scott, I guess. I mean, I've known Scott Shaw for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But I never met him until I recently joined a cartoonist chat group and got to know him. And it's funny, just like we were talking beforehand. So many people of our generation have so much in common, have so many interests in common. It really is sort of like a brotherhood in a way, and Scott's had just an amazing career. It's more about what he hasn't done. I mean, he's worked on, he was working on the Sonic the Hedgehog comic for a while, but I mean, he's really, a long time veteran of animation, working on everything from I'm just looking at his wiki here. He worked on the Fred and Barney, Fruity Pebbles and Cocoa Pebbles cartoons. He worked on tons of cartoons for Hanna-Barbera. He's Captain Carrot for DC. He's actually one of the co-founders of the Comic-Con in San Diego. He's worked on, doing toy design, storyboards. He's been a producer, an artist at just about every level in animation and comics. So I thought he'd be a great guy to have on the podcast, again, to show how comics is really just like a smorgasbord of opportunity, especially in animation, where if you've been in the business as long as Scott, you've worked with just about everybody, mm-hmm. and on just about everything, it seems, at some point.
I love it. Cool, thanks, Mike. That was really heartfelt. Guys, I'm excited. Scott Shaw is with us this week. And I would be remiss if I did not talk very excitedly about bringing him in via 3D rendering. So guys, get comfortable, because we're going to have a great conversation. Please welcome to Pencil, Scott Shaw. Ping! Hey, Scott.
That's better than anything I've seen in a long time.
No AI was involved in that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It was animated on ones.
We shot that on ones. I'm going to do my best to not embarrass you, Scott, but I was prepping for tonight's episode, and I found an artifact. So let's go back. What was 95? Was that 30 years ago? Yeah.
Yeah.
to this year, 30 years ago, before the internet was what it is now, kind of existed in the corners. I used to subscribe to newsletters. Remember that, guys? Remember you would actually get subscriptions to things? And issue 4 of this really important newsletter to me as a young aspiring cartoonist was called The Aspiring Cartoonist.
Oh, there we go.
And on the cover of this episode was Scott Shaw talking about doing storyboards for the Fruity Pebbles commercial spots. Scott, do you remember getting interviewed in this?
Oh, absolutely.
It's, dude, there's like 7 pages of you just kicking it. Oh my goodness. And I just drank this stuff up. I was like, yo, people actually do storyboards, and there's all of these examples. And if I didn't have resources like this when I was coming up, I don't think I would have known that there's so many facets to being a cartoonist. So I just want to thank you for this early peek into the business. And I don't know, maybe we could just start there.
Well, I mean, I'll be 74 in a couple of weeks. Actually, a week on September 4th. So as a kid, trying to find how to draw books, how to draw comics, most of them looked like crap. The only ones were the Preston Blair ones, obviously. There was also another one by, trying to think of the guy's name. He had a comic strip that was both in Spanish and English with funny animal characters.
Mm.
And he did one of the same ones for that outfit that did all the art books.
Foster?
Foster. Yeah. And, so to me, my only real ways of learning how to draw or write was reading and watching comics and cartoons. And back in the 50s, this sounds impossible to some of our viewers, I'm sure, but you got beaten up for liking comics too much. I got beaten up for knowing how to pronounce dinosaur names correctly.
What?
Well, and I was always a fat kid, so I'd even get beaten up for that and not having any interest in sports. But I'll tell you ever see that show, Young Sheldon?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was very much like him, a little asshole. Fred Flintstone's tie was green and not turquoise blue. I'd be like yelling at the world, So maybe there was a reason I got beaten up.
That's fantastic.
I just like that dinosaur names are a hill to die on. I so appreciate that.
When I was working at the ad agency, this was my last thing before I got laid off, was a couple of women from Post Cereal were there, and it was a commercial with them at the quarry, so I had a lot of different dinosaurs because I like designing dinosaurs, right? And I said, and here's a Hadrosaurus, and here's a so-and-so. And these women, I look over and the women are going, and I almost lost it. It was like, went back to 5th grade, like, you're still doing it to me. It was like, be in the news, women strangled by crazy cartoons.
But it's got to be wild just to see where we are now in these days where it's, we say it all the time that geek culture is pop culture, modern culture now. Like everybody loves this stuff to a degree.
Yeah.
I keep waiting for some scandal to wipe it out.
Like a meteor.
Stan Lee's remains. They find a bunch of dead nurses in a basement.
Oh my god. Oh, Mike.
Just bring out a different kind of fan, though, so we don't need that.
And I feel like that stuff always, everybody wanted to like it, but they weren't allowed to. I have to believe that. I have to think we somehow unleashed it, and now we get to like it. They get to like the Marvel movies. They get to like all that stuff.
When I was a kid, I remember there were girls that liked comics, but wouldn't let anybody know it, but secretly we'd trade comics and stuff.
Mm-hmm. But there was like a social price to pay for liking things that were counterculture back then.
Yeah, it's like when my son was a kid, all of his friends liked those action figures of wrestlers. And he had absolutely no interest. And one day he says, Dad, he says, is there a problem why I don't like wrestlers? I said, no. I said, you should like whatever you want. I understand why you aren't interested in wrestlers, because it all kind of is the same story every week, but whatever you like, it doesn't matter. Don't let anybody try to tell you what's good and what isn't.
The people say these days, like, don't yuck my yum. That's what I'm a big fan of. Well, Mike, why don't you get some questions going, and we'll kick this in.
Well, I was going to say, I think one of the things that probably really changed it was when Star Wars came out, and it was a global phenomenon, and everybody loved it, and it was cool to like Star Wars, right? When I always think back to how influential that was, because it changed like advertising, it changed comic books, it made so much money. It was such a phenomenon. It influenced all of entertainment, books, TV, music, film, comics,
Well, we saw that directly at Comic-Con too. I think it was, around 72, we started having more women coming in, and they were dressed as Star Trek characters.
Right, yeah.
And it was, I was a big fan of Star Trek, but I never had an interest in dressing up like one of their characters. So we did a whole thing. It turned out to be a band of people that didn't know how to play musical instruments for the most part, but we did a thing during the costume contest where the judges would have to get together, so they'd have to have something happening on stage. And we thought, okay, what if we had the same kind of fandom for Gilligan's Island? And we actually got kids to dress up like the Gillies, look like Bob Denver. And we did songs and stuff about it. And we were making fun of it. And the crazy thing was, I look at the photos of those girls now, and it's like, why wasn't I being nicer to them? They look like, now I'm going, you idiot! Why didn't you be more friendly to these ladies?
That's wild.
But yeah, when Star Wars came out, and I'm older than all of you, but I understand it. Star Wars was like my generation's watching King Kong on TV for the first time, the 33 Kong,
right?
Where it's like, holy shit, these are the best looking dinosaurs I've ever seen. It's not a lizard for once, and they'd show it on TV so much you could watch it over and over and over all week. They had the $1 Million Movie where they just
right. Yeah.
But I forget how old I was. I was already married to my first wife, so I was probably in my late 20s, early 30s. And I thought, yeah, this movie's really good, and I understand where it's coming from, but it didn't have that thing washing over your brain like kids that would be 7 years old. So I absolutely get it.
Was there a strain of Ginger and Marianne cosplay too, or that wasn't so popular?
No, we didn't have that many women. At least women that we could say, okay, now you dress like this and you dress like that.
I want to see the Howl.
Yeah, that's a Lovey Howl cosplay.
Thurston.
By the way, if any of you are interested in what Comic-Con was back in those days, I was involved with a book called See You at San Diego. Fantagraphics put it out. In fact, hold on just a second. I can show it to you if I could find it here.
I love the history of the Comic-Con. I mean, it's such a cultural touchstone at this point. It's funny to think that it didn't exist at one point.
Well, of course, now I don't know where I put it. But it's about this thick. I mean, it's almost 500 pages. And it's tons of photos. And instead of having one person try to do the whole thing, the fellow that put it together, Matt Klickstein, he interviewed 50 people, most of whom worked on the shows in the early times, and a few celebrities so we could slap it on the cover to get interest. Some people are just like, oh, this might be interesting. And none of us agree on anything. None of us, which makes it really great, because there are a lot of very controversial things during the, I won't go into it, but that book is worth looking at, and it's got some of my filthiest drawings ever printed in it too. So go
So why don't you, I guess, give us a bit of your origin story? I guess you know you were a kid in the 50s, right? Late 40s.
Right. Yeah. My dad was in the Navy. He was a Pearl Harbor survivor, so they made him an officer very quickly. And by the time I was born in 51, he was a assistant to an admiral, and he was stationed on Long Island in New York, and so I was born in a Navy hospital there, and we lived in the admiral lived in a mansion, and we lived in the servants' quarters. And while living in New York, there were two things that I think really influenced my life. First of all, for years, I mean, up until I was probably about 35, I had a dream about being in a huge room with a whale hanging over my head. I had to go back and have meetings with DC. I thought the first thing I do when I have time is going to the museum, because I love dinosaurs and giant displays. I go in, and there's a whale hanging over my head. And I almost fell down. And I called my mom and I said, "Did you guys take me to the museum?" "Oh yeah, we had you in a stroller, and you just loved it." Wow. The other thing is, I still remember this. When we were living on Long Island, and I've looked it up, it was only a local show. Ernie Kovacs. Remember watching through the bars of my crib. And I remember the gag. He had Dutch doors, and years later I realized it was just done with mirrors. You'd open the bottom and he didn't have any legs, and you'd open the top and he didn't have a head. I mean, something that even a baby can go, "What the fuck have I just seen here?" So I think those two things had a big influence on me, because by the time I was 5 years old, and I think all of us have that in our genes, if there were more of us, there'd do a study on it. It's in our DNA. It really is. And it's like a blessing and a curse at the same time.
Was Ernie Kovacs just a New York thing?
Well, he was at the time, and then he became national.
Gotcha.
But this was like I said, like 53 or so. And then we moved to San Diego because my dad, I think, had some clout, and he always wanted to live in San Diego. I guess he didn't want to live in Hawaii after what happened, because he always said that San Diego was the most beautiful town he'd ever been in. So being a white kid with a dad that's an officer in the Navy, I had a very nice boy head, other than getting razzed and hard time with the kids. But I mean, Balboa Park with the museums and the art stuff and everything was free at the time. And my parents would drop me off there when I was a kid. Years later, it was a great place to take your girlfriend, because they had a lot of bushes. I mean, San Diego is definitely a tourist city, and that was one of the reasons we never realized why Comic-Con got so big so fast. Years later, I realized this as a cartoonist, and I'm using everything I'm buying is tax deductible. I didn't realize that after Neil Adams went back, cartoonists were coming out on their own. They weren't just guests, because suddenly they could deduct a so-called vacation with their family to the greatest city to take kids possible. You can go to the beach, you can go to the mountains, you can go to the zoo. And we kind of took it for granted that, wait a second, we're in a magnet already. And cartoonists can finally, guys that their family only knew the back of their heads because they're constantly working, suddenly is the hero. Hey, even the spouse is, hey, I get to go lay on the beach.
and that hasn't changed to this day. Everybody loves San Diego. So
yeah, and a lot of times if you're girlfriend or your spouse goes, it's like, you go do the con thing. I'm gonna go, by the pool or do.
Certainly, but I got to tell you, it's really evolved in terms of, in ways I don't like, but the thing I really like, it's probably 50-50 now, men and women.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and it's like a sanctuary. Every third person I meet seems to be on the spectrum, as if we aren't,
Right.
I mean, just doing the job we do, we're all on the spectrum.
Well,
who else can be happy sitting in a room by themselves all day?
Right. Yeah. I've mentioned this before, but like first I started going to cons around 75 when we moved from Detroit to Ann Arbor. And you never, there might have been a couple of girls at the shows that were reluctantly drugged by their boyfriends, but you never saw women in line with a portfolio. Now, maybe it would be different in California because you've got animation and there's a lot of women working in animation, but I don't remember exactly when the changeover was. I have a feeling that it was sometime in the late 90s or early 2000s where suddenly you got a lot of women who were interested in comics, because a lot of my students, the bulk of my students, starting around 2000, there was always more women than men. And that just actually increased as I went through school and the longer I taught. And then I went back to school. And when I was in school myself to finish my degree, there were more women in school than men. So it seems like maybe one of the benefits of the geek culture is that we got a lot more women in the industry.
Yeah, that's great. Even as a kid, I always wondered, why aren't there more women cartoonists? Women are funnier than men.
When you were a kid, did you think, oh, I want to be a cartoonist, or did you?
I wanted to be three things, or four things actually. I wanted to be a paleontologist or a cartoonist. And then secretly, I wanted to be a kid show host, or even better, a horror host. Because that was, I feel that my lifespan has been very lucky. Right now, I'm seeing the worst possible of everything right now. But as a kid, I remember my parents would go to sleep. I'd go to the TV. I'd turn the sound off and watch shock theater in the middle of the night. I was a monster kid. I was more interested in monsters and dinosaurs. And the reason I liked dinosaurs so much, they were the only monsters you could talk about in school.
Right. Wow.
And God, my parents they weren't religious, but they figured they better take me to Sunday school and see how I reacted. And I again, young Sheldon, I said, do you want me to believe anything in that book? Can I believe in the books that I like? And they said, what are those? I said, Paul Bunyan, Uncle Scrooge, Little Lulu. And they're like, I called my parents. And then in second grade, we had those little easels. And so I did a brontosaurus, and I realized, gee, I have all these other colors. So I put a rainbow of colors going up its spine. And the teacher said, dinosaurs didn't look like that. And I said, how do you know? Your son has a problem. I did an article about the black Muslims in 8th grade. Your son has an issue here. It's like, of course, my parents were fine about that. They very nice and liberal. So they were like, yeah. And it's like,
I love it. So did you get in trouble a lot when you were in school? You don't seem like a troublemaker. But
I was and I wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got in big trouble in high school. They had the thing where the seniors on the newspaper, and I was on the staff 2 years in a row. And then John Pound followed me, who created Garbage Pail Kids and stuff. And he's still a good friend of mine. Another co-creator of Comic Con. But I was reading Mad a lot, and they had Arthur the plant. I didn't know that Arthur really was a pot plant. Sergio has verified to me many times, and knowing that I enjoy that stuff. And anyway, so I thought, well, I'm still trying to figure out gags. So I thought, well, I've heard about this pot, and Arthur was in a pot, so I'll put Arthur in the background and write pot on it. That'll be funny. And of course, they printed it, and I get called in by the principal, and he's like flipping out, and I'm calling it shit and stomping on it and stuff. And I'm going, I'm not even trying to get this guy mad. And look what it did. Whoa. 2 years later, I'm an underground cartoonist. So there you go. And another time I just couldn't deal with gym classes. I got beaten up all the time because I'd say, guys, it's just a game. I never learned that. You might as well just say, kill me right now. So I just decided I had a really good class. I had a very left-wing teacher who actually talked about what was going on in 67 and 68. And I thought, I'm actually learning stuff in this class. So I thought, I'm going to skip gym. I'm just going to stay here and listen to what he's talking about, because he never seemed to have, the usual, and today we're going to talk about this, and today, like the usual thing that teachers have to work from. He was pretty much just riffing. And so they came after me after about 2 months. They were probably relieved I wasn't there. He noticed it, and they tried to punish me. And they said, so what were you doing? Were you off smoking? No. Were you off at the market? No. What were you doing? I said, I was getting educated. Well, they said, well, we're going to have to punish you. They put me in charge of the sports equipment. I didn't even have to try to screw it up. Within 3 days, they just said, please don't do that again. So, yeah, I've always been kind of an asshole, but I think it's been not in a mean way. I just kind of like to.
Were you
myself.
reading and collecting comics as a kid?
Oh, absolutely. I taught myself how to read with comics. I'll never forget, I was in the hospital with tonsils, and being an only child, I was suddenly surrounded by all these kids of different colors and backgrounds. And I thought, they kept saying, well, you get ice cream. Well, look at me. I think I've had plenty of ice cream. But we all were reading comics and trading comics. And that was like a big thing. And it kind of like, not only did you make a lot of friends you'd never meet elsewhere, but it was also the first time you were kind of on your own, and comics kind of was there to be your pal. And my dad brought me what, I think of as like, this high. He probably brought me maybe 20 comics, but still that was more than I'd ever gotten at one time. And I still remember some of the comics. One was an issue of Superboy, the first superhero comic I ever read. And I bought it at Comic-Con maybe 20 years ago. And so I was 5 when I got the tonsils out. I knew that. And I started reading it, and I could suddenly, my brain couldn't do that now because it's worn out, but I could tell what they were going to say in the next panel. And I thought, holy shit, I already read this. And, all those Superboy and Superman comics, I mean, Weisinger was probably the biggest jerk ever to work in comics, the way he treated his creators. But he was brilliant in the way that he could make this stuff reachable. It'd be Superman's flying, and he's thinking, well, I better get to my Fortress of Solitude. And the caption is saying, and Superman's flying to the North Pole for his Fortress of Solitude. And then you see that goofy, giant, arrow-looking things pointing at it, which he always claimed was a flight or something, where planes use it. And it's like, I've never heard of that before. But, it was like almost every panel would like kind of hit you over the head, and it was really very useful. And I remember it was a Woody Woodpecker comic, and this was probably when I was 4. and it had Woody with like a little cafe in the middle of the desert, and Buzz Buzzard comes by and he wants some pie. And I'm looking at that panel, I'm going, that's just two triangles. One's hanging up above the other. And I suddenly just started drawing pie for everybody. You know, it was like, you know, and the thing is, even now, I know so many people in the business and in all the businesses that we do. And guys will say, I just don't know how to write. And I almost want to slap them, because it's like, we have watching movies and books and everything. Don't just lay there and let it wash over you. Just look at it for a change. And our son is now almost 35, but I remember with him, he'd watch cartoons and ask me about, you know, whoever's doing this guy's voice is also doing this guy's voice over on this different show. And I'm thinking, he's just like us. And he was a cartoonist for a while. He's now a barbecue chef, because that's one of the few creative things you can do to the public where they'll pay you directly. But either that or tattoos, right?
Yeah.
But it seems to be in our blood somehow that we are curious about it. We just don't see it as turning on and off the light. It's like somebody did it. Now kids say, "Hey, is that AI?" You know, that's not good now. But we certainly wanted to find out all the information. And for many cases, we couldn't until we were adults.
Yeah. So when you were a teenager,
things.
so when you were in high school and you were a teenager, were you then thinking that, okay, I'm going to go work in comics, or I want to work in animation? Did you?
And in 11th grade, I was working. I had a class actually at my junior high as an assistant to an art director or an art teacher. I never got any art classes except in high school and junior high and summer school one time in 7th grade. And so I was going back to be the assistant to the teacher I had in 7th grade. And one of the other teachers there was the ex-wife of a director at J. Ward. And she asked if she could send my sketchbook up to him. And within a month, I got an envelope from J. Ward asking if I wanted to work as a unpaid, what do they call it?
Intern?
Intern at J. Ward.
Yeah.
And I was 14 years old.
Wow.
I skipped a grade in school, and my birthday being in September, it's always kind of seems like it's a year behind everybody anyway. But my parents are like, and they were very supportive of me, really supportive. But I think my dad even wanted to be, if Pearl Harbor hadn't happened, I think he would have gone back to Illinois and been a sign painter, because he was really into lettering and did like, paint by number stuff and things like that. It's like, oh, my dad can do anything. Of course, he was interested in this sort of stuff and just didn't know. When you grow up in the Depression, that's not going to make you money. Right. But anyway, where were we on this?
You got the letter from J. Ward.
Oh, yeah. And they said, well, we can't move to Los Angeles for you to have a job that you don't even get paid for. You need to go to college, and stuff. And I'm like, okay. And then when I moved to LA in 75, I think, I couldn't find the letter. And then I thought, if I go in, they're just going to think I'm full of shit. So I'm not even going to try.
So what was your first job in animation? What was your first comic? Were you networking with people, other cartoonists? People?
Well, I was very lucky, because I was as 5 of the guys that helped create Comic Con were all my buddies at high school. We actually had a club, and we called it the Underground Film Society, because if we called it the Comics and Sci-Fi Club, we would have all had the shit beaten out of us. So, we figured, well, that sounds really cool, and eventually we found out what that was. But one of them was John Pound, who I mentioned, who has done a lot of stuff and much better artist than I ever was. Greg Bear, who's a science fiction author for many, many, many years, and he died 2 years ago. And a couple other friends that were always interested in the things they wanted to do. One was now is a physics textbook writer, and the other guy is an illustrator and a poet. So I was already had a lot of weirdos with me. And I also was in this thing called the GATE program, where it started when I was in 5th grade. I think it went 58, 59. And it was a whole thing. I never realized what it was. All of the smart kids, and believe it or not, I tested smart. We all were in the same classes from 5th grade all the way through 12th grade.
Wow.
And I found out years later, a friend of mine who I first met in that class in 59, she became a teacher, and her mother was a teacher. And I finally asked her one day, I said, you know, that GATE program, what was that really about? They would never let me have art classes. It was just science and math. And I guess smart enough to deal with all of it until trigonometry. And then I started getting C's and my parents got mad. But it was all about getting all the smart kids interested in science and math so we could kill the communists. It's still there. It's got a whole different thing, but I had to teach myself. In fact, I remember my counselor said, well, you could be a cartoonist in your spare time, but I think you should be a teacher. And I looked her in the face. I said, I know what teachers' lives are. They don't have any spare time, and turned around and walked out of the room. And I got a scholarship for college, and it was a local college in Point Loma. And, you know, when you're 16, 17, you're pretty cocky. And I'm thinking, well, I don't know why I got this. My grades aren't that good. I mean, it was like mostly A's, but nothing genius level for me. But after a while, I mean, like 20 years, I realized they wanted to have a cartoonist because I had a full page every week in their paper. And they let me do whatever I wanted. So sometimes I'd write articles. Sometimes I'd, do collages with word balloons coming out of characters. I just got to experiment with it and see what works for print, what doesn't work for print, what people are interested in. I remember in high school, I did a whole parody of the Justice League of America, and nobody knew what the hell I was talking about. So I immediately switched after about 10 of those. I said, okay, I'm going to just do stuff about school. A little too excited to do that. I remember Wits End magazine.
Yeah, the Wally Wood thing, yeah.
In 12th grade, I did a comic that I was planning on sending to Wits. I was like, what nerve! I mean, I've got the art and it just looks terrible. It's full of swipe, but I was trying.
So, what was your first? There you go. What was your first? Your second link into getting? Did you do comics first and then animation, or animation and then comics?
No, I did comics first. I was doing underground comics. The first comic published was in San Diego with a guy named Ken Kruger, who was one of the co-creators of Comic-Con. He had gone to, he was a longtime fanboy. He was at the first science fiction convention ever in 39 in New York. And he also had a chain of bookstores. And all the bookstores, he had science fiction on the front and pornography in the back. He had 14 different stores over the years and became a mentor to John Pound and myself and Greg Bear. And he paid us each $10 a page to do a comic book called Gory Stories Quarterly. And John and I each did, I think, 10 pages for it. And then he had some other guys do stuff too. But that was the first thing. And it was in 3 different editions. And that kind of, I mean, it's nothing to be proud of particularly. It's very juvenile. The main character is called the Turd. He comes out of the sewer and eats all the toilet paper in San Diego. But so I wasn't that good at doing pornography yet. I guess Ken could have given me a lot of research, but I never asked. But yeah, and from there I started doing a lot of I've been working on fanzines a lot. We had fanzines we just passed back and forth even in high school. But I think the first thing that really made a difference was I started working on the Marvel finally got the rights to the Hanna-Barbera comic in, I think, 77. And that I was manager at a comic store in Studio City. And a lot of people would come in, celebrities, cartoonists. That's where I first really got to talk to Roy Thomas, Steve Gerber, as well as people from Hanna-Barbera, because the shop was only about 2 miles away from H&B. And I had a studio in the back with most of my collection. I found out years later that the bosses stole some of my stuff to sell. But so what? But anyway, it was that kind of helped, because suddenly I was inking for Marvel.
Wow.
On and Evanier was the second editor, but I think he told this to our first editor, Case Craig. We finally got plenty of artists that work on these characters to do them, so they can actually do them in the style of Hanna-Barbera. And Charlton had been doing them for 3 or 4 years, and they just looked like a chimp had drawn them. They were so bad. And the overseas publishers were getting pissed because overseas people, they want the comics to look good. Even if it's Hanna-Barbera, they can make it good. And they were really upset by that. So I did that for a while.
Did the Hanna-Barbera style come easy?
Well, considering that I was staring at Hanna-Barbera from Rough and Ready on with a pencil and paper and crayons, and I think by the time I was 7 or 8, I did, because Rocky and his friends came out a few years later, but I did a comic with Rocky and Bullwinkle and Rough and Ready teamed up. So Hanna-Barbera and Jay Ward were both my favorite things.
Wow, that's great.
Equally good. But I think the better thing about Hanna-Barbera was Jay Ward had the funnier writing. Hanna-Barbera had the more appealing designs. And when the Flintstones started, they were advertising it. It was just like, I did a whole campaign because my parents had me, smart kid, okay, you have to learn music. Well, maybe if it was a guitar, it might have worked out. They had me doing a violin at one time, and another time a fucking accordion. It's like, no, and whatever the music lesson was, it was the same night and time that the Flintstones were going to premiere. So I just did a whole thing about, and just drove them crazy like young Sheldon. And finally, okay. And years later, I'd like mess around with them. I'd say, are you really upset with me that I didn't become a famous accordion player? But anyway, yeah, that and from there, that's where I got called from Hanna-Barbera at home. I'm sitting at home in my underwear inking, and I got a call from, I don't know who it was, but they said, we like your work on our comics. Would you like to work at the studio?
Wow.
And well, at this time I was, just, I don't know what was going on in my head, but I said, I kind of like working at home. What would the show be? They said, oh, a new Flintstone show. I said, when can I start? So I went over and I started working, not on the Flintstones, because they didn't have the finances officially to start in their books. So I worked on Godzilla with Doug Wildey as my boss.
Wow.
And I was in the layout department and on the side kind of doing some work on the upcoming Flintstone thing, just a few character designs and stuff. But I remember Doug came by and he goes, you're that Scott Shaw guy, right? I said, yes, Doug. Hey, you're the guy that draws that Bigfoot stuff, right? And in those days, Bigfoot meant doing gag cartoons and stuff. I said, yeah. He goes, you don't draw people too good, do you? I said, well, I draw monsters better because it was relatively realistic, even though by the time it went through studios in Asia, you had no control over what you got or who did it or how fast they were doing it or anything. But I kind of finally talked to him. I said, if I just do the scenes with monsters, I said, I'm only going to be this for another 2 weeks. He goes, okay, I guess that'll work. Okay, but that, being at H&B was like when I went to college. I got, I dropped out of college in my senior year because somebody stole my artwork from something I put in the school paper that won an award, and I wanted the art back, and they said, oh, well, we just gave it to somebody that liked it. And then I went over to I only got modeling. I got that far, and the teacher liked underground comics, so I loaned him a bunch of them, and all the ones that came back were missing Rick Griffin's art, which was his favorite. I thought, if I'm going to be messed with, I might as well just drop out. I can't take this anymore. It doesn't. Plus, I was in Orange County, which at the time was the most right-wing place in California, and that wasn't fun either for me. So, I ran away and wound up at Hanna-Barbera. At the colleges, all I really learned was how to roll a joint and how to unroll a condom. That was the only stuff I really remember.
Oh, my man. Oh, Scott, we have a couple of questions in here. Our good buddy Robert Alvarez has been loading up the chat with questions.
Oh, I bet he is.
Especially about your Hanna-Barbera era. So one of the ones I'll put on the screen. Scott, did you ever go for breaks down the street from HB to the bar called the Casting Office?
Yeah, I did. I wasn't a drinker, but there was a little place between where I could smoke a joint, so that was why I probably used to do it. But a lot of those cartoonists were drinkers, and in fact, a couple of them were really serious alcoholics, unfortunately, but very nice guys who would get all their work done in the morning, and then after lunch they'd be so bombed they'd just sleep at their desk.
Here's another one about what you're doing with your off time. Scott, did you ever notice the adult film office across the street from HB, Next World Supply?
Only years later, there was it kind of like hung over the street. It was a huge place, and I think I worked for a studio in that same building.
That's so funny. And here's another one. This is another Robert, and we have some more loaded for later. Scott, at some point you need to tell the story when Hannah was walking with you in the parking lot and what he said about creating new shows. Do you remember that?
Yes, I will be happy to. Thank you, Robert. I had been at H&B for a while. I'd stopped. I left to work on Captain Carrot, and then I came back and worked for another place, but then wound up at H&B again. And Bill and Joe were really interesting guys to work with, and I was always just blown away by the fact that I'm at Hanna-Barbera, the place I always wanted to go to. I was kind of embarrassing, I think, but a lot of the people were very nice to me. And so anyway, I never realized at the time, but I think they were kind of training me to be a producer eventually. So I became the producer of the Completely Mental Misadventures of Ed Grimley.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time we get back the first episode, which was over 600 feet long because Martin Short and his brother, who was overseeing the scripts, would not allow us to. We would just had to cut it out, which was like a nightmare trying to make sense out of it with that many feet, gone. But anyway, I'm working with Bill Hanna, and he's teaching me how to physically cut film. This is that long ago. It was 1989, I think. And I'm kind of making jokes. It was my birthday. And I'm kind of making jokes to Bill Hanna. I'm saying, if I was 8 years old and I told I was going to spend a day with my birthday with Bill Hanna, my head would explode. And he kind of looked at me like, Joe was Mr. Hollywood. Bill was let's roll up the sleeves and get this thing done. And at the time, they were kind of splitting apart because Joe was selling and promising things that Bill couldn't possibly do on the budgets they had. And I think stuff like Laugh Olympics that had 47 regular characters set in a different country every week.
Oy.
Yeah, exactly. So, Bill was kind of grouchy a lot, even though I like both of them really, even though there were certain things you made sure you had to avoid. But anyway, so I think he felt bad a little that he wasn't reacting to all the wacky things I was telling him all day. So we're going out to our cars. This was on a Saturday, nobody's there. And he kind of tries to put his arm around me, although at the time I weighed over 400 pounds, so that was kind of difficult. That's how I got the John Candy production, being the producer there. He wanted somebody that was his size. But anyway, Bill tries to put his arm around me. He goes, "Kid," I don't know where it came from either. I don't remember. At least he goes, "Don't create anything if you can steal it." He had throat cancer, by the way.
Oh.
And people used to ask him about, because he did those Flintstones cigarette commercials. You know, everybody makes mistakes. That was always his answer when people would ask him that. But anyway, I had to fake a laugh because I thought, well, I know you were doing that back when I was a kid. I remember before the Flintstones were out, they were promoting us. What if the Honeymooners were cavemen? And by the time I worked there, they were denying that completely because, Hanna-Barbera stole everything. I mean, I knew that Top Cat was Bilko. I knew that the Jetsons were Blondie. It took me a while, but I realized for a long time I thought Quick Draw McGraw is the only show that isn't ripping off anybody except El Kabong, which were only 6 episodes. And then I realized, wait a second, these guys are even smarter than I thought. They're not ripping off specific shows. They're ripping off the genres that were selling the most in prime time: Westerns, detectives, and domestic comedies. And that show, I think they're finally going to. I think there was a music issue, but I think it's finally going to be available on that MeTV Tunes channel.
Oh wow!
Because most cartoonists my age think that that's the funniest show that H&B ever did. But I don't think it's the funniest show ever at the time. My favorite show from that period is the Alvin Show.
Oh wow!
Because the Chipmunks have stunk ever since. And a good Alvin thing after that, and the Bags don't want anybody to see it. But there's now I think a Blu-ray that has 5 episodes, and it's worth getting even just for 5 because it's so unlike anything else you've ever seen.
Yeah, the classic Alvin and the Chipmunks stuff.
Yeah, really good, really funny, and very smart in the animation too, I think.
So here's another one. Robert also says he's got you locked down, Scott. Scott, you should also talk about working with Martin Short and John Candy.
Why didn't you just invite him? And
I should just log out and let Robert stand here. Yeah.
No way. Well, working with Martin was interesting. The guy didn't really seem to understand that we were making a cartoon, and I don't lay that on him. But we had a executive producer bullshit a lot. He told Mr. Short that he was going to see the finest cartoon since the best of Warner Brothers.
Oy.
One day we're shooting footage of him for the main title, which was half animated and half Colossal Films did that, and they were actually our co-producers, even though they mainly just helped us develop it so it didn't look like the average Hanna-Barbera show. So anyway, we're waiting around, and we're doing this, and Martin, who always wanted to be called Marty, but I never felt friendly enough to do that, said, "So how good is it going to be?" And I said, "I have no idea. It's all being done in Asia, and we're going to get it about 3 days before it has to go on the air." And his face is almost like melting. It felt terrible. I said, "Look," I said, "when Phyllis Diller teamed up with Scooby-Doo, do you look at that as like a high point in her career?" And I mean, I wasn't being mean, but I was thinking, you are Hanna-Barbera. Ruth Clampett once asked me if I would produce Beanie and Cecil if we did it at Hanna-Barbera, and I was good friends with her and Bob, and I said, I can't do that to you. I said, at Hanna-Barbera, no foot of film is any more important than any other foot of film. And then they took it to Deke and John Christofalusi just destroyed it with bad judgment, mostly. And fortunately, nobody's ever tried to do it. But yeah, that's how Saturday morning worked. So Martin was really upset when he saw the first episode came back, and he wound up doing new voice acting over certain things, like actually commenting on how bad the animation is. And I thought, we got to do something about this. Well, finally, I was just going out of my mind, because when you're producing a show, you're not only, there's a certain point where you're sending stuff out and getting stuff back at the same time. Mm-hmm. And you just want to shoot yourself in the head because you are just trying to do everything at once. He suddenly, at least suddenly to us, had to make a movie after about halfway into the season, the only season. And so I had time to figure it out. And Kent Melton is a sculptor and a really good artist. He had helped design the main look of Grimley in the first place. But he suggested something, and we kind of worked it out. I went over to Martin Short's house, and we had somebody else at Hanna-Barbera with a videotape, and he would tape acting out the scenes where he's actually acting like Ed. If he's being chased around by something, it wouldn't matter. But that way, we had Kent Melton drew out all the different poses that Ed Grimley would do on model. So then we could say on the exposure sheets, okay, you go from, there was no tracing any of the live action, obviously, but at least we could say, because now we had timing that they could look at, that the people doing the directing could look at,
right?
Say, okay, he goes from A to C to L, back to C, back to L 3 times. I mean, we kind of came up with a formula on how to do it. So he was delighted with how the last batch came through. And that's when he recommended me to John Candy. And John Candy was very sensitive about how he was going to be portrayed physically. He was one of all the celebrities I've worked with, the two that I liked by far the most, John Candy and Joe Flaherty. They didn't act like celebrities at all. They just acted like guys that wanted to have a good time. No egos whatsoever. And with John, I felt bad because Deke was a studio that just didn't give a damn. I mean, Hanna-Barbera wasn't that much better, but at least the quality, they had the right studios overseas, quite honestly. Whenever I'd ask for a retake, my bosses at Deke would say, you can't do that. We haven't paid them for the last series they did.
Wow.
So I actually was upset with all that. But yeah, while I'm trying to develop it, they gave me $20,000 to develop the show because it had to be done like immediately because it wasn't sold until May. And with the way the system works, that was way too late in the season to be starting. So I gave 10 grand to a guy that wanted to do all the backgrounds necessary. And I thought, okay, I've got tons of cartoonist friends. I'll say, okay, give me, say, half a day's work, $500, as many drawings of John Candy as you wanted to have. I thought, okay, man, I'm set. He's going to like the way his hair is on this one and the way I drew his legs on this one. Took him to him. He hated every one of them. Every one of them. I go home to tell my wife, I go, I am screwed. We have to deliver this tomorrow and show it to John. And I told him I'd come up with something. She goes, just draw him the way you look when you draw yourself. Like a potato with legs, like Fred Flintstone. And I thought, okay. And John goes, That's exactly what I want. I could have made $10,000 with one drawing. I've got a wife that is really smart and knows me and sees the whole thing from a better point of view than I do.
Now, were you still doing comics at all? Like, were you jumping back, or were you just working in animation?
I've always been juggling stuff. I wasn't doing as much as a producer, but yeah, I was working on other things. And then when I wound up at the ad agency, it was even better because after a year there, and we were always having to talk to the client was in New York, getting up at 6 a.m. for meetings. Thought, why am I driving across town? And I was doing comics. That's when I was doing the Sonic stuff. I was doing tons of stuff for those books that DC put out that were like one-page stories, but it would all have a theme. The Big Book of that. Remember those?
Yeah, the big books.
Yeah, for those. I mean, I worked on stuff for the Tick. I mean, as you've noticed on LinkedIn, I don't mess around. I spend my time working a lot.
So when did Captain Carrot mix into that?
I was working at Hanna-Barbera, and I had done actually, when I was working at the comic shop, Roy came to me and he goes, I need backup stories for What If. And I said, how about this? How about what if a radioactive human bit a spider? Done. So then I had to come up with a story, and it was a funny animal story. And it apparently was very popular because it's been reprinted 3 or 4 times. And now that Disney owns Marvel, they actually let me know when they're going to pay me, which is unusual. It's a weird feeling. But that kind of led to the fact that I was known for doing funny animals anyway in underground comics and things. So Roy and I started talking about this after becoming friends at the comic shop. Excuse me. And originally it was going to be just a lot of animals. And I got some drawings of those still, we pitched it. The concept was, what if Jack Kirby drew Mighty Mouse? And then after looking at them, I said, these are actually spin-offs of existing characters, and we want to have something to license and hopefully get a TV cartoon show, because I was working in animation, or had been. And that's what I left Hanna-Barbera to work on Captain Carrot full time. And so we created the Zoo Crew. And after I got all the Zoo Crew characters designed, I found this out 20, 30 years later. They went to Joe Staten and said, Joe, would you like to draw this comic? And Joe said, no, I think Scott knows what he's doing. Just because I can draw a squirrel or whatever, that chipmunk, I guess it was, in the Green Lantern stories. And I always loved Joe's stuff, because I always thought if I tried to draw realistic decent, I'd probably draw a lot like Joe, because he can do realistic stuff, and I've seen it, but most of his stuff has kind of a nice cartoony look. Even the horror comics he used to do for Charlton. So anyway, then it came back to me, I guess, and then Joe Orlando sent me on how to draw them, as if he was an expert on drawing superheroes. I guess probably they didn't know what to do with him a lot there at DC. They kept kind of bouncing him around. And I also think it's probably because he'd at least claimed to have worked on the Inferior Five, which we now know was Jerry Grandinetti with Joe Orlando's inking on top of it. But anyway, he got a little too interested in the female character from the Zoo Crew. They were a little too sexual looking. And anyway, so I had to suddenly add a lot of detail on the characters that I really didn't want to do, because if we wanted to do this as a cartoon, you want to have things so it's not just, you need to have some areas that don't have a bunch of details on them. Right. And that's why now Pig Iron has all those studs all over him and stuff, which would have just been crawling like bugs all over him if they animated it. And I could never keep up with it because I wasn't preparing for drawing in a whole new style.
Mhm.
because they wanted it to look more, muscle, not just Mighty Mouse muscly. They wanted to have it George Perez looking. They kept mentioning, "Can you do this more like George Perez?" And I'm like, "No, I can't." Well,
Yeah.
we'd like you to. And then they were paying me terribly, and they kept hanging a carrot in front of me, no pun intended. We'll raise your rates if you just keep getting these in on time. And it's like, you really don't understand. So then Roy had me writing some, and Stan Goldberg was doing them, and I was just getting more frustrated with working for DC. And frankly, humor comics in general, they're just not popular anymore.
Yeah, we were talking about that.
Yeah, they think that if the dialogue is funny, that's humor. Well, it's a kind of humor, but how about some? I mean, I think that Captain Carrot still has. In fact, I saw Nickelodeon is running a thing now with a character that looks like Captain Carrot, who has a car like Captain Carrot. I actually contacted somebody at Warner's. I said, "I think we're being ripped off." He showed it to the lawyer. He said, "Well, it's not being ripped off enough. We can't do anything."
It needs to be more ripped off, right?
Yeah. However, my relationship with Captain Carrot and Warner Brothers has been finished, because they, without talking to me about it, I worked for McFarlane on a bunch of Hanna-Barbera stuff years before, but they came out with a Captain Carrot figure a couple of years ago that looked nothing like mine. They've changed the whole character. Now he's like a giant hulking cat that looks like a monster. And so they did a figure of that, kind of. And I thought, okay, well, I own 10% of the property. Roy owns 5, and he split it. He would have had 10, but he split it with Jerry Conway for some reason. I think some sort of deal between themselves. So I own 10% of every character, no matter what it looks like, if they're going to call it Captain Carrot. It took 3 years, but I finally got paid. And it was more than I ever expected. I mean, not problem solving money like thousands used to be, but pretty good.
Scott, there's a question from. Let's see if I can get this up on the screen. Hold on a second. Dr. Bezo Weezo asked, "Did you come back for the Oz Wonderland book?"
No, those are by Carol Leigh.
Oh, I love Carol Leigh. I was just talking about Carol Leigh.
Yeah, Carol's an old friend of mine.
Wow.
I got her into her first comic, in Fear and Laughter.
Wow. All right, cool. Thank you, Dr. Bezo Weezo.
So were you doing this and going back and forth between animation? Like, it used to be like you would have between seasons, did you pick up comic work and then?
Well, that's why I mentioned about Bill and Joe kind of training me, because I'd see people much more useful than me. I mean, Floyd Norman was my partner. They called him us partners. What Floyd is my mentor. And we've become very, very good friends over the years. But Floyd would get laid off and I wouldn't. And I'm thinking, what's going on here? Shouldn't this guy be here instead? This guy knows much more than me. But they'd have me work on development stuff. They'd always find something for me to do. And I mean, Hanna-Barbera may have, at that period, not making cartoons you're particularly proud of. But of all the studios I've ever worked for, I've never had bosses that were so loyal, not just to me, but they still had guys that had worked at MGM on Tom and Jerry's in the studio if they were still capable. And that's what I said, working at Hanna-Barbera, I never got to say it really. For me, that was my college, because everybody was interested in helping me and teaching me.
So you were learning on the job.
Absolutely. It was like going to college and getting paid really well. I mean, it was just incredible.
So now that all mixed in with you helping develop Comic-Con, and I guess that was another networking opportunity, I suppose?
Well, I mean, I think, it's just, as I keep saying, it's in your blood. That's all you can talk about. All your friends are the same way. And, the people, especially in LA, if you're working on comics, you're probably working on an animation at the same time. Most of those comics we grew up on that Dell put out and then later Gold Key, most of the artists drawing the characters were working at had worked at the studios. Carl Barks decided to do comics because he was much more in control of the stories than just working on storyboards at Disney.
But you seem to be very involved in the community the entire time, whether it's working in the back of a comic shop and meeting Roy Thomas. That's how you met Roy Thomas?
Yeah, but we had a cartoon group here for 45 years called CAPS.
Right.
You know, I used to be on the board of the National Cartoonist Society, and now I'm just too old to want to be in any organization. The one we have on Fridays is fine for me. There no rules, no money to be paid, but you know, I mean, as an outsider, I guess I like talking to other friends. If you have somebody that has any aspect of you is the same with people like us, it's pretty unusual to meet unless you're doing this for a living too.
Scott, have you been to the Rubens in the last couple of years?
No, I haven't. The thing that I liked about the Rubens was getting to talk to other cartoonists. The thing I disliked about the Rubens was, well, probably because my pants fell down more than once, is renting a tuxedo in a room full of people that are also all wearing tuxedos. So you can't find anybody that you want to talk to. Everybody's the same.
Well, I'm kind of easy to spot. So next time you could pick me out of the crowd.
Well,
well, Scott, I have a question. We talked a little bit about this before we went on live. I was talking about that I'm really aware that there's maybe one or two generations of kids who grew up on Sonic the Hedgehog comics that are still very popular. So I'm wondering if you had anything to say about your time doing Sonic. That was for Archie, right?
Yeah, Archie's a problem company. They say they're the most wholesome comic book company in the world, and it feels like it's in the old days when the mafia owned the comics, quite honestly. They mess with people like crazy. In my case, I was asked to do it because I was known for doing funny animals, and I decided to take the job. I was working at the ad agency at the time, and working from home, I think, by then. And the main reason I took him on, he looked like Felix the Cat to me a little bit. I didn't know that was intentional. I don't know the man's name, but the guy, the Japanese cartoonist that created him, he's supposed to look half like Felix and half like Mickey because those were the first two stars of animation. Mm-hmm. But I did the issues. I didn't write them, and the writer was pretty good. He even supplied layouts, which makes it really easy. And I had the ability to change it, but he thought visually, which most writers don't. So I like that. But it turned out that I never signed a work for hire, and yet they owned everything. Mm-hmm. I never got paid for any of the reprints. I had been working at the ad agency, getting very good money for advertisements I was doing for comic books, and they were using my art to give away at Toys R Us, whole comics full of my stuff without me getting paid a cent. If I'd known that, I would have turned down the job. But unfortunately, or fortunately, I should say, taking on that gig, that's one of the only characters kids know when they come to see shows. I'm delighted for it because, frankly, I actually like those movies, or at least I certainly like Jim Carrey in them, because he made a deal. He said he probably has a kid in his family he wanted to impress starting off. That usually happens with celebrities. But he made the deal. He said, I'll play Robotnik if you let me write his dialogue. Mm-hmm. And as you've seen, he's by far the most interesting thing in the movie. The first movie was like a kiddie movie, kind of. Right. The second movie kind of started feeling like it maybe was for a bigger audience. And the third one was so weird and funny and morbid at the same time. I was really impressed in seeing the way they had essentially Jim and two characters at the same time and dancing and stuff. It was pretty impressive. I mean, I haven't followed Sonic since I did the pages, but to see it still lasting, and for me to still have kids come up to me and say, I mean, kids act like drawing the first Sonic is like drawing the first Fantastic Four.
That's big to them. It's real big. Yeah. I always find people surprised about how excited kids are about Sonic comics.
Well, I'll tell you, I used to draw for kids coming up to the table if they were, say, under 12 or so, especially when kids come around and they just go, I go, you like to draw, don't you? And they're like, well, how do you know? They act like suddenly I've been like listening to them or something. It's like, because that's how I look when I see stuff that I like too. But now, you know, I think I'm kind of known as one of the guys at shows that really wants to talk to kids. And so drawing them, I get backed up because I'm trying to talk to 5 people at once, but I have a giveaway on how to draw Sonic.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, I feel like I've been so lucky. I've been mentored by Gene Hazelton, the guy that designed Doubles and Bam Bam, but was much better than that. He was the only guy at MGM that was passed around back in the 40s rather than for just one of the units, because he was so good at designing stuff. And he was doing the Flintstones comic strip as well as Yogi Bear. When I was a high school, I'd go over to his house and he'd give me the drawings.
Wow.
I mean, how lucky is that? Bernie Lansky was another guy, not the criminal, but a guy that would meet me at the Jewish Community Center every week. Show me what you got. And then Jack Kirby. Jack Kirby was always giving me advice. And Floyd Norman, he told me all about the craziness of animation, how to deal with an ex-wife, all kinds of things.
Those are all great life skills.
Yeah.
That's big.
Before it gets too late, I wanted to tie in this. A lot of this is covered or touched on in your book, right? The Scott Shaw's Comics and Stories. It has the
Why, yes, it is. Hello, this is Gary Owens.
And then, so when I was looking through you were kind enough to send a PDF, but it's got your work for the early Comic-Con San Diego. It's got your fanzine work in there. It's amazing.
I did a lot of stuff.
It feels like that's volume 1. Like there's no way one book can contain everything you've done.
Yeah, I'm finding stuff all the time, and I've got 4 storage spaces up in Bakersfield.
Wait, 4 storage spaces?
10 by 30.
Oh my God!
I pay $8,000 a year just to keep them from. I mean, it's horrifying, but I look back my entire, in the last 20 years or so, you can't use it as a tax deduction. But I get every comic in the rack and realize, most of this I'm not going to read again, but at least, and you know what? When I'm gone, my son Kirby has a lot of stuff to sell.
Scott, do you want us to share any of your pages that you sent over?
Oh yeah, we were talking about, and then I forgot. I've been going through. My agent has been selling a lot of pages of art from me, and I found some that I didn't want to sell. This is a cover for Captain Carrot, 14, one of the last ones I did. But you can see I did caricatures of all the crew as funny animals down there. I think Roy's looks the most like Roy. But by the way, I don't know. I should start selling these in bags. Going through all my stuff, I have all the lettering that's fallen off of them.
Oh my goodness!
It's like, hey, make your own comics, kids. This isn't even mine, but I finally met him at a show. Yeah. I always liked Tom Grummett stuff on that Superboy comic. Yeah. One of the few mainstream comics I thought was fun in the 90s.
Yeah. that's so cool.
I even inked an issue of that over time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
His stuff has an appeal that I really like.
That's really
Oh, here's another Captain Carrot page. I liked it the most because I did a really funny caricature of Tom Snyder as a rabbit. I mean,
that's a great Tom Snyder too.
yeah, I really crammed this page with stuff. And they're wondering why I'm not on time because I wanted to make it interesting. You know, it's like
That's gorgeous.
give them some extra stuff. Oh, here's one from issue 1. This is the origin of pig iron.
Wow.
Wow.
I love it.
And then let's see some current stuff I'm doing. I'm doing a comic strip for a tabloid for kids called A Kid in a Comic that apparently sells quite well in children's hospitals. So here's the 3rd episode of a strip that has never been published yet, but will be.
Oh, wow.
The character there that kind of looks like me is Pack Rat, and he owns a giant museum of pop culture stuff. And this is the episode where he finds out that somebody has been stealing stuff out of the museum, but before somehow this expert at the end over on this side, this side. I mean, this side. Can't do it right. But he finds out it's a time machine thing that's stealing stuff. So it winds up being a long story about his team and another team going back in time trying to steal popular pop culture stuff. And the whole point of it is to kids is don't buy something you think is going to be worth something. Buy stuff, collect stuff that you love, whatever it is. Because I think that so many of us are being controlled by marketing these days. Oh, I'm also doing a new book is coming out that is we were talking about Sonic and Archie. I actually, through the Library of Congress, bought back all of my pages. Archie never even noticed it. We had to go through them and they didn't pay attention. So it's going to be every one of my Sonic pages recolored by an outstanding young guy that just makes it look like Disney art. Very lush. And it's going to be a 180-page hardback book. Wow. So we just finished this morning as one of the few new pieces in the thing.
Who's publishing the Sonic?
Yeah, I don't know how that drawing table's floating either, but I figured.
Hey,
we don't need to know.
Yeah, who's asking? That's right. Steve, did you ask a question?
Yeah, and who's publishing the Sonic book?
Ken Penders. Ken Penders has a company called Floating Island, and it will be available around, depending on the shipping, because it'll be printed up in Canada, but hopefully in November. This is the last piece for the whole thing, so we're sending it off in a week or two.
Fantastic.
There's a question before. I hope you're comfortable with being on the entire screen, Scott. This is great.
There's plenty of me to fill up the screen, believe me.
And I'm loving that Dell rack in the background. But Bear Edwards asks, do you still work all traditionally, or do you do anything digitally at this point in your career?
I am just starting to learn how to color digitally because I'm tired of asking friends to do it for me.
Yeah.
And next, I need to learn how to lay the lettering in because I always write too much and I'd like to be able to edit it myself rather than people saying, we can't fit this in. So I'm going that route, but I still want to have art on a page. Not only, it's hard for me to even remember how to use the coloring stuff at my age. Due to a life of partying, my brain probably isn't as good as it used to be.
So what the digital, do you have something that you're using more specifically, like an iPad, or do you have like a digital tablet? Anything
I'm going to show you something that is in process right now.
Yeah, let's see it.
Let's see how I can do this.
And I'm seeing an Ink Pot Award back there. And
Oh, and the Sergio Award.
fantastic.
You ever see the Sergio?
That looks heavy. Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, you could kill a couple of people with it.
Just hit it with the mustache part.
That's right. Let me see here. I'm gonna. No, that's.
So you flip back and forth between traditional and digital depending upon the job?
No, I always draw with pen and paper. You see this? Can you see what this is?
Yeah,
Oh, that's something I've colored.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I've still got a few things to fix, but not bad.
And do you like being able to kind of like zoom in and zoom out, pinch in and out on the tablet?
Yeah, except it's really hard to see all the flaws in my art blown up. It just makes me draw everything.
Yeah. There's
At my age, I mean, I used to talk to Will Eisner a lot about this because I noticed that he was changing his style once he didn't have any assistants. And the older he got, the simpler he made things. And we used to talk about this a lot before the Ink Pot Awards. And I've really learned from him, and I'm just figuring as long as I can still tell a story correctly, it doesn't matter. My work doesn't look as good as it used to. I still think it's as good as I can do, and I think, all of us agree on one thing just looking at your own artwork. We all understand the number one thing in putting not just a good story, but making people want to come back. Make the characters appealing.
Mm-hmm.
Not like image stuff from the 90s.
Right.
The only guy out of all that stuff that I still follow is Eric Larson because he just does it all himself anyway, and it's great. You never know what's coming.
Yeah. We had Eric on a year or two ago. It was a great episode. It's we all kind of I think we all kind of have the same hive mind in the same way. Like we all kind of always have an appeal to the same artist in a way, or they kind of all fit in the kind of same kind of track. Like we're all on the same page in a couple of ways.
Exactly.
All right, we're going to start wrapping up. There's a couple of questions. Steve, do you think you can nail these questions real quick before we get out of here?
We touched on that one. Joseph Cahoon Draus on YouTube asks, Scott, do you have a dream project you would like to see become real? And would you want it to be print or animated?
Well, my dream project is coming out next year. For many, many years, I think I started in 1978. I do a thing at Comic-Con and other conventions, if they're interested, called Oddball Comics. And I essentially take comics that were not underground, not fanzine stuff, all stuff that was published and then on the spinner racks at Mayfair Market. And as a cartoonist, you notice stuff that you never noticed as a kid. And as a comic artist, you know that you're always dealing with an idiot editor, and you want to see if they really notice this. Does this get through? And often it does. And I've seen, and I mean, it's not just all disgusting, but there's a surprising amount of stuff that the Comics Code Authority did not notice. Probably the most famous one, and I have to have it at the end of every presentation, is the Rifleman cover, where Chuck Connors is holding for some reason a big log at his crotch at a certain angle, and Johnny Crawford looks like he wants to shoot himself in the head, and it's a photo cover. But so I mean, that's the sort of thing I'm talking about. Anyway, Tomorrow's is finally publishing a book that I've been trying to do for many, many years, and I've been working on it like a maniac, and it will not focus just on genitals. I'm trying to figure out. You know, John is a guy that doesn't like to have things that are too disturbing. So I'm kind of trying to figure out new words to describe some of these. But
That's great. Thanks for the question, Joseph. This is just a comment. We got Dr. Bezo. I need that book of yours. How can people get that book of yours?
you mean books, don't you?
Those books of yours.
Yes. Contact me. I'm at. Now this is. I should just write it out maybe, but no, I won't because I got to shut down. Shaw Cartoons, lowercase, all one word. Shaw Cartoons at gmail.com. Do we have a quick time just to flash some artwork too?
Yeah,
sure.
Have I got that right, Scott?
Yeah, just run them. Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Give me 1 second, Scott. Let me load that up. Do you want me to show the pinups?
Yeah, I'm pathetic, aren't I, ladies and gentlemen? Been asking these nice people to help.
And that comment is seconded by George Gant. No question, but I want to say this is probably my favorite episode, hands down. Also, I got to get that book.
Well, get George on here and we'll talk together sometime.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I finally am using paint pens. So I did a whole bunch of these of characters, and they're for sale. We won't talk about prices right now, but if you're interested, again, contact me and just roll through. We've got Alley Cat Dabra. Oh, that's Fozzie Bear is the thing. I worked on Muppet Babies for many years, and I thought that worked out well. Oh, Baby Gonzo, my favorite on Muppet Babies. There, Cap Carrot Headshot.
Nice.
I love that color holding on.
And there's my star from Underground Comics. That's Pointer Toxin, my takeoff on Hunter Thompson.
Pointer Toxin.
The biggest influences in my life.
I love it.
That says too much about me right there. There's Fastback from Zoo Crew. Oh, what if Fred Flintstone was the Hulk?
I love it. That's great. And this is all paint pen, like Posca markers or something.
Yeah, yeah, they're fun to work with.
Yeah, they are. They're really strong colors to it. Look at that.
Yeah, there's the guy that I whispered to the TV. That's what I'm gonna do.
And finally mixing that paleontology back in.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh, nice.
Oh, there's Little Cheese, one of the last additions to Zoo Crew. Oh, I'm going to be at, by the way, those of you in Los Angeles, I'm going to be a guest at ToonCon in Burbank at the Marriott on Sunday, September 7th.
Wow, that's coming up.
And drive me crazy, please.
Scott, do you do a lot of cons? Do you do a lot of appearances?
When my agent gets me there, I've probably done about maybe one a month for the last year.
Oh wow! How does that? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was at one in Philadelphia, in fact.
I wish I had known that. We could have got cheese.
Yeah, it was an expo.
Oh, okay.
And I'll tell you, I really enjoyed that show.
Oh wow! Yeah, that was a Fan Expo Philly. That was just the summer, right?
Yeah. And I was at a small one in LA just a month ago. That was the Soul Con, and I was delighted. I was the only artist invited that was white. It was really a nice feeling.
Yeah, there's nothing but love, man. I'm sure you had a great time, right?
Being at a party more than a convention.
Scott, before we sign off, our good buddy Tom Zoller had a question about when you were holding up your art. The Captain Carrot cover, he wanted to know, was that twice up? Or was that regular?
No, that was 10 by 15.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's fantastic. Hold on, let me get them off the screen so you can see. It was 10 by 15. Did you normally work that size, or did you kind of vary it depending on what you're working?
No, that's easy for me. I do like the idea, though, like this, using a different angle, figuring out a different way to tell your story, because suddenly you can have a nice long panel if you need it once in a while.
Right.
You know, I just like experimenting at my age, trying something new, you know, doing something for the first time. It releases endorphins, you know, you get all giddy about it.
I love it. Scott, you've been a fantastic guest. Thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Well, thank you all, and thank Mike especially for inviting me.
Yeah. I thought it would be great to have you on again, because you've done so many different things. And I think a lot of times people think you just, you know, if you're a cartoonist, you just do one thing. But I think you should be able to do a lot of different things, because we're usually all interested in more than one thing. You know, I think, you know, and it seems, and maybe it's also because in animation, you get a season, you get 2 seasons, then you got to change, you got to go another show, another style. That's probably a little bit more different, than doing comics. You know, because like Jack Kirby didn't change his style when he went to another book.
No, he even did funny animal comics in the 40s, and they still look like Jack Kirby style.
Right, yeah. That weird alligator or whatever it was thing that he did, yeah. But so now you have the book coming out from Tomorrow's too. You can talk about that.
That'll be out next year.
Okay.
The Oddball Comics book.
And it'll be called Oddball Comics?
Yes.
Cool.
That's really cool. Yeah. Tomorrow's is very dear to our hearts. And it's
I've worked with John on a lot of projects. I also write for Retrofan every issue.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm working on one right now about Little Shop of Horrors and all of its different formations. I actually worked on the cartoon show where they could just call it the little shop, because it was only supposed to be based on the original, but not anything from the musicals.
Oh wow, I forgot about that. It's Scott. Before we let you go, I think all the Scott Shaw fans know about the origin of your exclamation point, but you got to just put it on record. So, can you explain the exclamation point to Scott Shaw, which is a real part of your name?
Well, for many years, I think people thought it was just because I have a massive ego. But frankly, anybody that expects people to pay them money for lines on paper, you have to have a big ego, right? But when I was a kid, I think I was in 7th grade or 8th grade, I decided to add that exclamation point to my name. Now, there were a number of reasons. They had movies coming out. I remember my favorite movies was Dinosaurus, and it had an exclamation point. But a lot of movies had that in them. I also liked the fact that in comics, it was either an exclamation point or a question mark, because the paper was so bad. They were worried that if you got a chunk of wood in the wrong place, you thought that was the end of the sentence. But my biggest reason, and I'm always been a big fan of Big Daddy Roth and all those hot rod characters. I can't change the oil in my car, but I always loved that stuff, just at the right age. You know, couldn't drive yet, hormones going crazy. And I'll actually show you how much I love that stuff.
Eyeball stick shift.
This is how much I like Rat Fink.
Wow.
Yo.
My Rat Fink foot.
That's
But anyway, there was a guy that apparently Big Daddy Roth ripped him off because he had there was another guy who went by the name Mouse. And his signature, his actual name was Stanley Miller. He wound up doing all the art for Grateful Dead, but he had these model kits and T-shirts, and he is the guy that kind of designed the basis for Rat Fink, from everything I've read. But he signed it with just a silhouette of a mouth with an exclamation point next to that, and I thought, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I have to say it must be, because I actually once got a job that was a pretty good paying job from a guy that said, I can't remember his name, but he's the guy that signs his name with an exclamation point.
Yeah, I love it. All those parts all add up. And I also have to say, seeing your rat Finkfoot was not on my bingo card for tonight. I was not expecting that. That's fantastic.
I was on a panel with Big Daddy Roth's widow, and she didn't see it until I put it up on the table. And I let her know. I said, "No, this is using one of your official T-shirts. Just melded right in." So then it was okay.
Oh my goodness, that's fantastic. Scott, you're a fantastic guest. Thank you so much. I don't
part cartoonist, part freak show. It's great.
Yeah.
I don't say this to all the guests. It may sound like I do, but we'd love to have you back. Maybe after your tomorrow's books comes out, we could talk about that and help promote it.
I just hope we're all at the same convention at the same time.
Oh yeah. All right. So beyond the one show that you're doing, do you have any other shows lined up for the rest of the year?
Unfortunately, not. But my agent is working on it like crazy. I'm driving him nuts.
Okay. All right. Very cool. We'll have to make that happen. It was fantastic getting to know you a little better. And again, this aspiring cartoonist thing changed my life. I have every issue. I think I dropped this off at Mike's house once. He was just like, "Wow, this is a lot." So,
as you've seen, I don't shut up.
No, none of us do. So you're a good company. So, all right. Well, thanks so much, Scott. We're going to sign off. If you want to hang out and we do a little outro on the way out. If you
no.
All right, awesome. And Mike, do you have any last words before we get out of here?
I would just say, so the place that people should really check you out is like on Instagram or Facebook.
Or contact me directly at shawcartoons@gmail.com.
And that's for commission. Do you have a commissions list? Do you have a price list?
Yes, I have all that stuff that I can send out to people once they come to me.
Okay, great. Well, thanks a lot, Scott. It was great catching up again, because we usually talk every week, which is a lot of fun.
Don't be bragging.
Yeah,
I invite the rest of the gang once in a while, would you please? we don't have any kind of a limit. Believe me, we'd love to have both of you to show up, as well as Mike.
All right, this sounds great. I'm going to definitely try to make it this week.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Scott. I'm going to say goodnight, guys. We will be back next week with, I don't know what our guest is yet, but you'll be the first to know as soon as we do.
All right.
I know that our September is chock full. I think we're almost full up. I think we have a guest almost every week of the month, but I'm not going to do any of that reveals yet. It's going to be a really spectacular September and October. So thank you so much. We do this every Wednesday at 8 p.m. EST. Don't keep it to yourself. Tell your friends. This is one of the best things going today. You heard it here first. Thank you to tonight's guest, Scott Shaw. You were a pleasure and a dang delight, as Dave Kellett says. And to my buddies and co-hosts, Mike and Steve. Thank you guys so much. Guys, Benedict Cumberbatch told me we're in the end game now. It's getting really close. We're running out of space. But it will be imperative before we go to that cold night to wash those Kirby hands.
Let's see an old Kirby hand. There you go.
Some Kirby hand. There you go. That's a good. You got to blunt the fingertips. There you go.
Yeah, we gotta fall asleep on our fingertips. Square them off.
That's fantastic. Thank you, guys. Have a good night.